Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in a few seconds. But as you get situated, the topic of discussion today is platform for disruption and innovation. And we are privileged to be joined by our good friends, John Saw from T-Mobile and Asha Keddy from Intel. So to kind of set this up, I just wanted to kind of give you a brief history as to why this topic is important to many of us. My name is Chetan Sharma. I'm the CEO of Chetan Sharma Consulting. And we do strategy work in the industry across the ecosystem, across the value chain, from chipset manufacturers to governments. And I've been thinking about this for some time, number of books, number of articles, but more specifically, a lot of work has gone around 5G and what it might mean for the industry. What the models might succeed, what's happening around the world, and so on and so forth. And so for folks who have been following our work or have been at Mobile Future Forward, have seen me wax poetically about connected intelligence, because we think that this is the 30, 40-year long cycle that economists have talked about for the last 100 years. I think we're in a new cycle. And our 2014 paper kind of put that thesis forward. And as we have seen over the last 6 years, a lot of it has come true in terms of sensor capability, in terms of software, AI, and now the access layer with 5G. And so the way we think about connectivity is as a platform, and hence the first topic we want to discuss in this series is mobile network as a platform or 5G as a platform. And this is something we have been kind of researching and talking about for some time. And so we do a survey every year at the end of the year to kind of look at what's likely to happen. And 5G has figured prominently in most of the questions that we asked. So biggest mobile stories, 5G continues, 5G use cases, fixed wireless made a big comeback, but enhanced multimedia and broadband are the key elements for this year. And as we kind of go into different use cases in this decade. And who are the winners? And that's will continue to shift as we go along because we don't know how it's going to pan out. We have some ideas. And that's why we have this series, 5GNext, where we try to figure out what's coming with 5G. And we thought we'll line up some technologists, which we have here today. Asha and John are our favorite technologists in the space. And then the next series will dive deeper into applications and services. So with that, I wanted to welcome John and Asha. John, as I think almost all of you know, that has been in the wireless industry for a long time. He got acquired by T-Mobile last year, and they threw in the spectrum for free. And it has worked out really well for T-Mobile. Asha has also been a veteran in the space, especially on the standard side. A lot of the work that she and her team does has impacted how 5G is evolving and will evolve going forward. And if you have not checked out, I would recommend checking out her US Senate testimonies for better understanding of how policy and technology mix. So with that, John and Asha, a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So John, maybe I will start with you in terms of your role and how you see 5G. I mean, clearly from the Clearwire days, you know, your love affair with 2.5 gigahertz, it has come to fruition now. It's the most valued asset in the industry around the planet. But your position really caters towards figuring out what do you do with that asset? What do you build on top of it? And so if you could talk about how the mind shift has changed from a platform side, you know, what 5G means as a platform for application developers or other vertical industries, that'll be great.
Thanks, Chetan. Just a small correction to your introduction. When T-Mobile acquired Sprint, they actually acquired some very valuable spectrum at very good value. They threw me in for free, not the spectrum. Anyway, happy to be the part of new T-Mobile, and you're right. My role is to find ways to leverage advanced capabilities of the 5G network and search for new use cases that will take us beyond the smartphone. I like your introduction charts, Chetan. Connected intelligence is certainly the platform that 5G can be a catalyst for. Interesting chart you showed about what happened with LTE. 15-fold increase in revenue, and look at how much transformation 4G brought us, right? The beginning of the connected intelligence era, right? In the way you have put it. But as awesome as LTE has done and has been for us, it is it's a very simple generic data layer. But 5G is a bit different. It's designed from the ground up to meet the needs of enterprise customers with features like low latency, with real-time processing. Network flexibility is not available in LTE, like network slicing and capabilities like that. I mean, in fact, Asha will tell you that the 5G standard is still evolving to be even better and better as we go into future releases in 3GPP. The other big difference is the LTE is mostly about the smartphone, right? And we have had some awesome smartphone capabilities recently. In 5G, smartphone is just the beginning, right? If you look beyond the smartphone, you have capabilities like ultra reliable low latency capabilities that you will not get with LTE for mission critical and life critical applications that you won't get with LTE. On the other side of the spectrum, right, it has the ability to support massive machine type communications, right? Basically sensors, low power sensors, but lots of them with a lot of data coming back that requires real-time processing. So 5G can do so much more, right? And if you think that LTE has been disruptive and has helped move our economy the way it is today, I'm very optimistic that 5G, in terms of vertical spaces that it can transform, it will be very disruptive to many of the enterprise verticals.
Great, and we'll get into some of the application discussion a bit later. So Asha, I mean, the standardization for any technology starts generally 10 years prior. You have watched the standardization process evolve, and now here we are with millions and millions of subs. And so in your mind, what has the industry gotten right with 5G, and where do you think we need to work on, whether it's tech standards or whether it's policy making or ecosystem development and so on and so forth?
Thanks, Chetan, and as John, and by the way, I like the presentation context setting too. I think if you look at the standard setting process, right, we are in the middle of 5G, if you will, right? Kind of like we are the equivalent of LTE advanced, and the things that the standard setting process got right was to realize that we have to have more of a forward compatible air interface, which means that different use cases, right? Versus focusing on a video or a killer app and then chopping it off to do IoT, right? So I think we got that right. And the other thing that is right, that it's getting right, especially as mainly because the standard setting process has gotten a lot of delays with the COVID, is it's actually innovating with like the force multipliers that you mentioned, like AI and edge compute, and integrating those workloads in release 16, 17, the concept of private networks. The area for development or improvement in the standard setting process is, I think, focus, right? And what I mean by that is we're serving several masters right now, like every operator, right? And then also different kinds of things like smart cities or mining or surgeries and all, and automotives. And I think we, as the standard setting, are not experts in these areas. And I think we made some missteps, like in the beginning of the automotive industry standard setting days, where, but we're doing much better now with Industry 4.0 and AIC and all of those. So I think a little bit more listening and working on how structured standard setting process as comms intersects all these communications, intersects these verticals, is where we need to develop. And I think we're doing better, but I think we can still do better there.
So, I mean, it's a good point around automotive has clearly been an active participant in providing their requirements to 3GPP. But healthcare, for example, even though we talk about remote surgery, they haven't been really involved. Their requirements have really come through, not directly, but indirectly through Intel or T-Mobile, but not directly. So I think the point about them getting involved much more early in the process, so that some of the nitty-gritty and detailed requirements around what latency is really required for doing a surgery right is based on our understanding of their industry rather than the other way around. So it's a good point.
If I may add, the industrial one is going much better, I think,
yes.
like with the time synchronization
Yep.
and latency and enabling the TSN and indoor location. So we're doing well with the Industry 4.0 folks.
Got it. Okay. Now, both T-Mobile and Intel have been part of the 5G Innovation Lab here in Seattle, and you guys are already on your third cohort. What are some of the early learnings, John and Asha, and where do you see the biggest traction coming from? Are there certain application areas that are just emerging based on what you have seen? And John, clearly T-Mobile has the biggest network in the US, and so most customers on it, 10 million plus, that are using it. And so any early learnings from how these consumers are using 5G? From Korea, we learned that there is 2.5 to 3x jump in data consumption. What's happening in the US? What are people using it for? Maybe John, you can go first.
There's a lot there in your question, so let me try to unpack it little by little. When it gets to the Open Innovation Lab, T-Mobile is going to be spending, last year and this year and next year, upwards of $40 billion building a very capable 5G network. And you're right, we do have the largest 5G footprint today. But we have to find ways to leverage this network, right, beyond just selling customer smartphones all day long, all right? And that's part of what we're trying to do with the 5G Open Innovation Lab. We realized that we have to build something bigger than ourselves. And work with all the smart folks out there with cool ideas on how to disrupt many vertical spaces, and also work with partners who brings a lot of strengths. Intel is one key example. We have been strong partners together. And we see the value in creating an environment where we can bring in startups and young companies that tend to be nimble, that then tend to think outside the box to help us disrupt many vertical spaces using 5G, right? That was the whole motivation behind the Open Innovation Lab. For the first time ever, we are seeing, 50 to 60 startups come through our programs, right? Not just the Open Innovation Lab, we have our own curated programs as well with the T-Mobile Accelerator as well, and working with universities. So we need to do all this because we need to build something bigger than ourselves. Some of the themes we're seeing are, and what these folks are bringing in as ideas are themes like video and video collaboration. It's still going to remain a big use case, starting with LTE, right? 60% of our traffic today is video. If you believe Ericsson's projections, it's going to go up to almost 80% by 2025, right? In this past pandemic year has taught us how central video is. Right, in all aspects of our lives, the way we work from home, the way our kids are learning, the way we collaborate. We don't have a choice. Everybody's working from home, right, and not in the office. And I think 5G is the era where you can leverage two-way video. 4G LTE, a lot of it is just one way, right? We're streaming Netflix movies, right? But with 5G, we see more of a two-way capability. When you can couple a camera with computer vision, with artificial intelligence, we can provide so much value, right? In factory, in safety, in equipment inspection, right? So computer vision with AI is an important opportunity that 5G can help fuel. Startups, like, we're working with a startup that creates platform for augmented reality. And that's a Seattle company, and couple that with a HoloLens. We're using that capability to build cell sites today. Faster, more efficient. You can get expert help from anywhere in the world, and this is directly, can be translated to many different industries. Mixed reality is another big area, right? XR AR, VR works so much better with 5G.
Yeah.
You're no longer limited by the limitations of Wi-Fi in your house. It doesn't have the capacity crunch and latency issues that the LTE has.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a growing area. Another area that we're seeing that we're doing a lot of work is in the area of wearables.
Yeah.
I think your smartphone is going to be a gateway. It's starting to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
A gateway for smartwatches,
Mm-hmm.
where you can get a lot of real-time biometrics data.
Yeah.
Right. And spatial three-dimensional sound with smart headphones.
Yeah.
Is being worked on. It's coming out.
Yeah.
And someday you can potentially get a bigger screen with augmented reality with smart glasses.
Yeah.
So the smartphone is still going to be important, but it's going to also start to act as a gateway for our customers, I believe.
Got it. And anything unique you have seen with existing 5G customers? How they're using existing content, or are they getting into more XR games, or just consuming more video? Like, what's happening with the 5G customers?
I think we're seeing a lot more consumption with 5G, and it always supports the adage that if you give a customer a more capable network, they will find ways to use it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is it's video communications, two-way video interaction. We see a lot of gaming, and just different ways of consuming bandwidth. And with the pandemic, work from home, a lot of it is video conference calls.
Yeah.
And 5G can help disrupt all this capabilities as well.
Yeah. I've seen your holographic meeting videos. I think they are pretty cool, and I'm sure that's in our future at some point.
It is. In fact, that was I conducted the first all hands in the company using three-dimensional holographic video, but it shows the potential of what you can do just with a 5G smartphone.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we're all, suffering from Zoom fatigue by now, and wouldn't it be cool if we can operate in 3 dimensions, which we're naturally inclined to do?
Yeah. Yeah. So Asha, you have been talking to a lot of enterprises. Intel focuses a lot on enterprises. The notion of private networks and edge is something that you mentioned. How are enterprises thinking about it, and how is Intel talking to them about 5G as to what 5G brings to an enterprise?
So thanks, Chetan. And I think it's kind of some of the same themes that we have been talking about, including with John, around different and new use cases, right? Mm-hmm. I always like to say technology is predictable and what we do with it isn't, right?
Sure, yeah.
And in an enterprise, I think the factors that they are looking at is how are they going through what I would call digital transformation. Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing there is we used to have an IT network, right? You have operational networks depending on the enterprise, and you have a communication networks that overlays. So all these players are coming together because, we call it like these networks are becoming the same because it's just data, right? And everything data. And not only these networks are becoming the same, they're looking at how do we have flexibility for it, right? For example, like a football field with antennas can be the manufacturing of the future, right? With the digital twin. So we're working with enterprises. We're really looking at the different kinds of data flows in an enterprise. What do they need to keep? What do they need to keep on site for latencies or privacy or security? What do they want to have in the cloud, right? And so it's a very and looking at costs, especially like quality of service, which depends. And Wi-Fi is also very well entrenched.
Yes.
So you can't forget about Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is really great for things that are not so latency sensitive.
Yes.
Cheap. Yeah. So we're looking at it holistically, and we're finding, and we're trying to model like what the different enterprises look like, and the common themes around a converged network. And the same things apply. It's not just about the data is converged, but how do you accelerate things? For example, safety is becoming a big issue. Cost, like in a AG, like those automated guided vehicles, right? In a factory, they're expensive. Yes. How do you, and you have to pre-program it. So how do you dumb it down where you can then from the edge server get the new maps or the instructions? So you just put safety on it. And the same things can go in the external robots. That's one example. A less interesting example may be just cost, right? Even with the AR, VR glasses John talked about, if I can guide somebody to a place and get them information, I save the cost.
Yeah.
The cost. So the same things that the consumers consume, we can use to save cost. And flexibility, the downtime between one setup or an enterprise reconfiguring itself, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's like environment where we have an all hands and we need to increase the capacity is much faster, right? Because you're not cutting wires as much. You're adding the flexibility. The way I look at it is we're creating a high performance mobile compute environment in an enterprise.
Yeah. John, how do you see the private network opportunity? Is it going to be building private networks using T-Mobile spectrum, or is it CBRS? Is it a mixture of both? What is it going to be?
I think if we take a step back, and Asha, I agree with a lot of what Asha said, right? If we take a step back and think about what the enterprise space needs, somebody very smart coined the term connected intelligence a few years ago, right? And that's what they're trying to do. And they're trying to transform the businesses with new capabilities for connected intelligence, or some of us call it Industry 4.0, right? Moving big data to make their outfit more intelligent, right? Automation that requires less human intervention, right? And you cannot do this with yesterday's technology, like Wi-Fi, right? A lot of this, we're not streaming Netflix here in the factory. We're talking about mission critical and life critical requirements, right? And so that drives, the discussion and the need for private 5G, right, with access to a private edge, so that we can connect all our intelligence fast and at the time that they are needed. So in terms of the implementation for private networks, in terms of the spectrum, different countries now have made spectrum available just for this. In the United States, it's CBRS. Right? In Europe, there are different flavors of the same thing. And I think enterprises, probably feel more comfortable having access to this spectrum as opposed to sharing the spectrum that operators have. I can see private networks needing both, basically private spectrum like CBRS as well as operator-owned spectrum, because we have to serve different needs, right? So you're going to see private networks with a private persona as well as a public persona, depending on the use cases they're trying to support, right? But it's a very nascent area.
Yes.
Chen, it's lots of hand-holding needed on both sides. We need to understand how enterprises, where their pain points are. They need to understand, the potential of them having to now operate a network, and new partnerships has to be forged between the network vendor, the systems integrator, the enterprise itself, as well as the network operator like T-Mobile. Right? Who does what, and where does the value blocks sit? Right? I think it's a big enough piece of a pie that we can all jump in. And this is why in T-Mobile's case, we're talking to all our big enterprise customers to understand their pain points and how best can we help them. But if you boil it down to what they really want to do, it's basically to bring connected intelligence down to the shop floor.
Great. For people who have joined, if you have any questions, please, you can chime in Q&A box, and I'll try to get to them before we finish. Asha, kind of along the same notion of private networks, there's this push in the industry around Open RAN and open in general. How do you think that's panning out? I mean, clearly there are European operators who have made that part of their 5G rollout. US is slightly different. China is taking a different approach. Where does the Open RAN or open even core or open in general fit into the 5G story?
Thanks, Chetan. And the way we look at it is Open RAN is one implementation, but we're really talking about virtualization, right? And that we mean like more like how do you have more interoperability and things like that is where we're headed with it, right? How do you virtualize it? And the whole point of that is how do we make things where it wasn't that long ago, John, remember when people had to climb towers, tilt the antenna 6 months for a push to service and all, right? So the real thing is around flexibility and having, going from custom to general purpose networks and to virtualize it so that we can have different components more quote unquote off the shelf. I think also some of the trends you see are also where the forces are driving. Europe, I think, has 116 operators, right? Which is a lot of operators compared to 3 in China, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it becomes like a huge question around cost.
Mm-hmm.
So and flexibility. So I think cost and flexibility is where Intel is, where we see this as a big need.
Mm-hmm.
And even technologies like WiMAX back in the day, I remember option A, B, and C for those geeks who remember it, was an attempt to actually start solving this problem. So I look at it as, I think it becomes inevitable for us to start looking at where you have, more flexibility. Can you get it? You still need some things dedicated or accelerators and all. And I think US just has different dynamics. And I know T-Mobile has been pretty vocal on it too. But I think the way I see it is there is a need for more flexibility and more, off the shelf and more generic things and new entrants that provide choices, right? So I look at this as a virtualization journey. And there's some benefits to it, including the open source community on the software side that it generates and the innovation and all of it. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the use case, it's a combination of communications, compute, including AI, mission critical, the domain specifics, right? So it becomes an accelerant.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes is the way we think about it.
Yeah, got it. So John, another big topic in the industry and in the policy circles is around and competitiveness. And I think there is no dispute about who led the LTE cycle. Clearly, US dominated it. And a lot of the US companies ended up creating applications and services that made US lead in the LTE cycle. 5G cycle is quite different. Though we have been at it for some time, probably we are roughly at 30 to 40 million subs in the US. Still a long ways to go. Clearly T-Mobile is ahead, but others have some ways to go before they deploy their C-band. China is at a rocket ship start, and anywhere from 200, 300 million subs, depending on how you count it. And so how do you see the global competitiveness? Clearly it's good for the ecosystem and industry, but it also means that if a nation is providing scale to application developers, they might gravitate towards that country. And so how do you see US, China with respect to 5G? And what can US do to kind of keep the lead that it had with LTE?
Yeah, so good question, Chetan. First of all, never underestimate China's resolve to lead with 5G.
Yeah.
They've made it a national policy for them to lead in 5G and really to eat our lunch. But a lot has changed with the merger of Sprint and T-Mobile.
Yes.
If I can give me 20 seconds to brag a little bit, right? We're spending $40 billion to add many cell sites that now cover 287 million people in the US, right? So the US is in a much stronger position post-merger,
yeah,
right? And along the process, we have also spurred AT&T and Verizon to invest more in 5G just to keep up with us. Just look at how much they spend between the two of them for the C-band auction, $80 billion
yes,
plus, right?
Yeah.
So all this is creating a highly robust and competitive 5G market in the US. And the other thing is we need to also, look at what we read about progress in China. And like what you said, let's make sure that we count apples to apples.
Yes.
Right? Number of subs must be counted the same way.
Same way.
It looks like a very big number when you hear reports that there's 600,000 5G base stations in China. But they have a lot more population than us, 4 to 5 times more.
Yeah.
Right. But if you boil it down to a common metric, like how many sites does it serve, a 5G
Yeah.
site?
Yeah.
I think we're neck and neck. I mean, the last time I look at this, one 5G sites serve about 5,000 to 7,000 people in China and the US.
Yeah.
So it's neck and neck in the pace of build. And the other thing also, like you said, rocket start in China. We give them that, but it's really not how fast you start, it's how well you finish.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And you know, the bigger question is not so much who's going to win the race for 5G. Right? I think, you know, the more 5G we have, the bigger the scale, the better the ecosystem. I think the real question is who will lead as a global hub for innovation fueled by 5G. Right? And if I have to bet my rent money, it's going to be in the United States.
Yeah.
I believe that a free market economy will drive meaningful innovation better than a state-sponsored innovation. Look at Uber and Airbnb and what LTE created in this country with a strong LTE network, right? And T-Mobile and Intel and folks, we are spurring innovation activities like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
At least in T-Mobile, for the first time ever, we're seeing 50 to 60 startups in the past year come through our programs of curated innovation to try to build a global hub here in this country. So I like our chances. I think it's looking good and looking better for the United States.
Asha, any thoughts on the same question?
I think John, I agree with John. Thoughts and the innovation and look at the startup nations. Thing that I would add though is you asked me what we did right, and this is, I think one of the things we did right is this is our first universal cellular standard, right? And you know, even with LTE, you had LTE and TD, and you know what I mean. So I think the reason for these opportunities or these conversations is this is our first universal standard, and I think all countries came, and that's actually one of the more fascinating things. I just wanted us to remember that, or remind everybody of that. And I think what John said, if I interpret it as the accelerants, including the AI and the innovation, because Uber wasn't around taking video calling, which was what 5G was designed for. But the unpredictability of the innovation will basically be the market and the innovation.
Right. So one of the accelerants in the LTE cycle was cloud, and how it interfaced with smartphones and the LTE network. That gave birth to gigantic revenue streams from AWS, Azure, now Google Cloud, and so on and so forth. How do you see hyperscalers interfacing with the 5G world? Hyperscaler or the computing industry seems to think communications is an app over computing, and communication industry thinks that computing is an app on communication network. As these two worlds collide, especially around edge networking, how do you see hyperscalers coming into private networks, coming into edge, and where are the opportunities to collaborate?
I think cloud and 5G are symbiotic, Chetan. You need both, and you know, with 5G, they're leveraging a cloud with real-time capabilities and significantly more capacity. With 5G being prevalent everywhere, right? You can make smaller robots, you know, fly faster, further drones because the brains is now in the cloud, right? So again, coming back to your connected intelligence point, right? The cloud and 5G goes hand in hand. Now, the cloud for LTE is mostly a public cloud, right? And Asha talked about Uber accessing the cloud for information about matching customers to cars, right? I think with 5G, we're now talking about hybrid clouds. You have the public clouds where the hyperscalers have thrived, right? Now you need to talk about private clouds or private edge, right? Coming back to intelligence on the shop floor, when you have so much data with artificial intelligence and machine learning and big data, how do you get all this data back to your private cloud so that you can act on it, right? That's the conduit is 5G, right? So now we're talking about the concept of a hybrid cloud, right? Where you have, where enterprises will need access to public and private clouds, right? So I think the concept of cloud computing or edge computing is going to go hand in hand with 5G. 5G gives it a reason why you need edge computing, because you can get lower latency, significantly more capacity, right? Ultra reliable capabilities, right? That justifies the investments in bringing the edge closer to your customers.
Yeah. So, on edge, clearly, if you're doing enterprise deployments, you can get closer to the on-premise edge. Do you think we are going to get to a point where essentially all base stations become edge data centers, or even get even closer to the customer premise for both enterprise as well as consumers?
I think certainly that is one concept that we are exploring. Right. One thing I know is that nobody is going to be closer to a T-Mobile customer than our network.
Yep.
Right. Just in lieu of the fact that they communicate through our network using smartphones. Right. The interesting discussion and debate that we're having is, where does the edge lie? Right.
Yeah.
For a factory, the edge is going to be, like I said, the shop floor, or where work is done, or in the farm itself, when you have sensors that your edge needs to be there. For the customers, the edge might be actually be in your home. That's the far edge.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Why bother bringing traffic and renditions back all the way to your core if you can actually do it right at the far edge? So those are some of the concepts we're exploring, Chetan.
Yeah.
Right. But the key enabler for all this is 5G.
5G.
Right. There's a reason to actually talk about that now.
Yeah. Asha.
If I may add, you made me laugh with the compute and the comms, because I'm in a company that has both, right? And we have a CPU company, right? Like traditional. Yeah. That's our bread and butter. And so even when the architects draw it, you can see which side you're on, because they have a big CPU and comms like that. And with 5G, they have a big 5G and compute just enabling it. Yeah. But to build on what John is talking about, right? Edge is not about moving the server from the 6th floor to the ground floor, right? Yeah. It's actually a redesign based on the workloads. And in some ways, for my watch, my phone is the edge, right? Yeah. Because I can do a lot of things. So I think what really we have to think about is the redesign, like lower the latency. Can you start enabling things like RDMA access, right? Like 0.1. So I think it's really about the redesign to the workloads that change. Like the mission criticals will be on site, right, on-prem, and some of the my emails will be in the cloud, right? So how do you segment the workloads, and how do you redesign it so that it's much more than a CPU that you're dragging to be close to you? Yeah. Is what I would add. Yeah.
Now, one of the pandemic changed a lot of assumptions about how we think about ourselves, our capabilities, both personally as well as in enterprise sense. And one of the things that clearly changed in the industry, at least for me, was the rise of the need for fixed wireless. Initially fixed wireless was going to be very surgical, focus on enterprise, but now it seems everybody's so distributed. And even after we all get back, the notion of a hybrid workforce is taking hold. I know T-Mobile has a few products announced over the last few weeks in fixed wireless, both for businesses as well as consumers. Do you see this as a permanent opportunity, John, that we are going to build upon fixed wireless, and it not only provides connectivity, but also starts to do content, and you start to compete with the broadcasters and so on and so forth?
Yes, short answer is I think the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and we may never go back to what I would call the old normal. Right? The pandemic has also opened up a lot of cans of worms in terms of how unprepared we are as a country for so many things. Yeah. And one of them is access to broadband capability. 1 in 4 Americans don't even have only one broadband as an option. Yeah. Right. And in rural America, it's even worse. Almost 30% have no access to broadband at all. Yeah. Pandemic hits, we send these guys to work from home. They started this battle for the bandwidth with your family. Kids are going to school on the same Wi-Fi, and you're trying to do work. So we see a need at T-Mobile that, hey, we need to do something here. And with a massive 5G capacity we're building, we can. And that is why recently we offered the work from X, right? I think in a new normal post-pandemic, it's not so much just go back and work from the office anymore. It's going to be, like you said, a hybrid. It's not so much just work from home anymore. We want to give our future employees in this country the option to work anywhere. That's why we call it WFX, right? And therefore, we actually put together a fixed wireless platform that is just dedicated for business use, high security, right? Meant only for business use, so that you don't have to fight for Wi-Fi access with your kids going to school at the same time, and with all your neighbors trying to do the Zoom calls at 9 a.m. Right? That was the whole motivation why, and we believe that this is going to be the new normal moving ahead. It's going to be a very hybrid, very fluid and flexible workforce for pretty much any company.
Asha, any thoughts? And then I wanted to ask you a question about automotive and how 5G and automotive industry are intersecting.
Sounds good. I think the only thing I would add is I think we talked about countries before. Policies and incentives become important. I just want to that we did, for all it's good that we got all the spectrum. The government is now giving us a lot of spectrum, maybe a bit later, but it's giving it in abundance, so that's good. And then the policies that incentivize to fix the issues that John was talking about are super critical for us to continue as an innovative and an equitable nation. Is my
any kind of insights into how 5G and automotive industries are intersecting? I know a lot of the work has gone on the standardization side with C2VX and other standards. When are they coming? When are vehicles going to be enabled by them, and the role 5G will play?
So I think before, I think everybody called it autonomous cars, and we've now gone to a much more sober and realistic vision of autonomous is more about the radar and the safety, and connected car is where 5G comes into play. And so I think there are different elements of 5G. I think that including the side to side, right? See, everything is connected in 5G, including what we call the side link, right? And the vehicle to infrastructure like traffic lights and all of it. So the way I look at it is we're getting to a much more sober thing where we're focusing on the connectivity pieces. And I think the big industry automotives, as they are building their autonomous car, they're using the connected car pieces as augmentation, or the connectivity is augmentation, whether it's to communicate or to get more downloads. So the way I look at it is, remember, we're intersecting the automotive cycle, which has its own cycle of 10 years and all, right? So I think now we are at the point where we have the technologies from a comms point of view that can help with platooning or all of these things that enhance, right? Or information like look ahead that I can't see with my eyes. But the automotive cycle has to then design these in, right? And they have their own cycle. So I think we are in that delay loop of now we have something meaningful that helps augment their work, but they have to then design it in, and this is the first of these.
Got it. So as we approach our end of our time, one final question around, as you look towards the rest of the year and maybe even into 2022, from a 5G platform perspective, what's the most exciting thing that you know and the rest of us don't know about?
I think the pandemic has taught us a lot. It taught us the importance of having a good connection, and with 5G we can enhance the experience. Like I talked about video earlier, right? Even with three-dimensional video. I think the whole mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality is going to work so much better with 5G, and you're going to see capabilities for the workforce. See what I see with remote expert help, training becoming more prevalent, being used in industries like healthcare and in the workplace, in construction, in oil and gas. I think the whole concept of connected intelligence, Industry 4.0, right? There's a lot of talk, a lot of discussions on what Industry 4.0 is. I think 5G is going to be a catalyst, right? When you talk about factory automation, AI and machine learning, robotics, machine to machines without humans, smart sensors everywhere. Right? You're going to start seeing, the prevalence of this coming to line. I think sensors are getting cheaper.
Yeah.
Remember, was it in 2011? I think Mark Andreessen said software is going to eat the world.
Yeah.
I think if you look back, he's right. I mean, look at companies like Amazon versus Barnes and Noble's brick and mortars, right?
Yeah.
And software was eating the world, and then suddenly the pandemic hit, right? And interestingly, Mark wrote an article last year that talks about we have to build again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we were completely caught unprepared as a country, not just the United States, right?
Yeah.
We don't have PPE, not enough cotton swabs, no testing, everything. So his key point was we need to start building again.
Yeah.
My point is that agreed, but we have to build more intelligently right now, and 5G can be a catalyst for us to rebuild our factories the way we do automation, for us to transform healthcare, for us to bring digitization closer to the end user and the factories. All this is 5G, and this is where the opportunities are.
Yep.
Right, in the next year.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Asha, final words?
I think everybody's smart, so I don't know if I have much to add, except a few, that we're seeing the pendulum switching back to a silicon cycle. We need more system because and better silicon types because the software is at a saturation point, right?
Yeah.
There's a shortage, and this so I think as we get to more sustainable, renewable things, the connected intelligence is code for me for personalization and customization. And I'm looking forward to the unpredictability of the innovation there to do things that help with drought conditions, for example, or with the rural connections and all of those. When they get connected, they will spur the innovation. So I think this journey of enabling people to do their own innovation in a customized way is what I'm looking forward to.
Great. Well, as you can see, I can go on and John and Asha can too, and we can spend a lot of time. But unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. And thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, John. Thank you, Asha. And let's do it again sometime soon.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you again.
Thanks. Bye.